The first thing I learned at Eden Crown University was that money had a sound. It was not the engine of the cars rolling through the front gate, or the polished shoes clicking across marble. It was the silence that appeared when rich students looked at someone like me. I stood there with my faded bag, my scholarship letter folded in my pocket, and the guard asked twice if I was sure I had not come to deliver food. I told him my name was Ryan Malik, and for 1 second, he checked the list like he expected the paper to apologize for including me. Behind me, a girl laughed softly inside a red sports car, and a boy leaned out of the window to ask if the university had started accepting charity cases. The word hit me harder than it should have, because I had spent 3 years earning this place honestly. Then my phone vibrated. I thought it was my mother asking if I reached safely, but the screen showed no sender, no app, no notification bar. Just one clean line glowing over the cracked glass. Someone looked down on you. Reward credited, $1. I stared at it until the guard snapped his fingers in front of my face and told me not to block the entrance. I almost laughed because $1 sounded like a joke, but when I opened my banking app, the balance had changed. My account, which had been sitting at enough for 2 bus rides and 1 cheap meal, now held exactly $1 extra converted into rupees. While I was trying to understand that, another student passed and muttered that my shoes looked older than the university. My phone vibrated again. The second dollar arrived with the same cold message. Then a third came when someone asked if scholarship students had a separate entrance. By the time I crossed the courtyard, I had earned $9 from strangers who did not even know my name. It was pathetic, impossible, and addictive. Every insult that had once made me smaller now made my balance grow, even if only by enough to buy lunch. My admission orientation was inside a hall so expensive that even the chairs looked richer than my neighborhood. Students introduced themselves by family companies, international schools, and summer homes. When my turn came, I said I came from South Ward and received the Veritas Merit Scholarship. The hall went quiet for half a breath before whispers spread like smoke. Someone behind me said merit was just poverty with better grammar. The system paid me again, and my shame suddenly had a receipt. I wanted to turn around and tell them I could hear every word, but my mother's voice echoed in my head. Keep your head low until your degree is in your hand. So I sat down, swallowed the heat in my throat, and watched my balance rise by small, ugly amounts as strangers measured my worth through my bag, my phone, and my address. That was when Kian Astor stood on the stage as the student council president. He was the kind of rich that did not need to show off because buildings already did it for him. His family name was printed on half the scholarship brochures. He smiled like kindness was a public performance and said Eden Crown welcomed all students, regardless of background. Then his eyes found me, and his smile sharpened. After the orientation, Kian walked directly toward me with 3 friends behind him. He asked if I needed directions to the financial aid office, but the way he said it made the nearby students laugh. My phone vibrated once, twice, then again as his friends joined in. Kian placed a hand on my shoulder and told me not to feel inferior, because sometimes poor people worked harder when they knew their place. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I looked at my phone and saw the system total crossed $20. That was enough for medicine my mother had delayed buying last week. My anger turned into something colder. If their contempt could be converted into survival, then maybe I did not need to beg this world to respect me. Maybe I only needed to endure it long enough to understand the rules. The first class made everything worse. Our economics professor asked everyone to submit a paid case study kit through the campus portal by noon. The price was more than my monthly grocery budget. When I raised my hand and asked if scholarship students could access a library copy, the professor barely looked up before saying elite education required elite preparedness. Half the class smirked like they had been waiting for proof. My phone vibrated under the desk. Reward credited. Reward credited. Reward credited. The system did not care whether the insult came from words, smiles, or silence. It sensed the moment someone placed me below them. By the end of that lecture, I had enough to buy the kit, lunch, and my sister Noor's exam workbook. For the first time that morning, being underestimated felt like holding a secret weapon. During lunch, I went to the cheapest corner of the cafeteria and still felt nervous reading the menu. Kian's group sat nearby with trays full of food they barely touched. One of them tossed a coin onto my table and told me to upgrade my meal. The coin spun, stopped near my hand, and every person around us waited for me to react. My phone lit up with 5 new rewards. I picked up the coin, placed it neatly beside his untouched dessert, and said he needed it more than me if throwing money was his only talent. The table went silent. It was the first time I had spoken back, and the shock on their faces was worth more than the system payment. Then Kian laughed, not loudly, but dangerously, like I had become interesting instead of invisible. That evening I called home and lied that everything was going well. Mother sounded tired but relieved, and Noor grabbed the phone to ask if rich colleges really had fountains inside. I said yes, and she told me not to fall in because we could not afford a new uniform. I laughed with her, then sent money for groceries without explaining where it came from. Mother texted back 3 question marks and a prayer. The system sent another message at midnight. Current humiliation rewards, $63. Dignity balance active. Rule 1. Rewards increase with social rank of the person looking down on you. Rule 2. Spending reveals alignment. Rule 3. Cruelty produces accelerated returns, but unstable ownership. I read the words again and again, especially the last line. The system was not only paying me. It was watching what kind of man I became. The next morning, Eden Crown discovered I could pay for my own case study kit. That should not have mattered, but small changes bother people who enjoy seeing you trapped. A girl from my class, Mira, whispered that someone must have sponsored me overnight. Another student asked if I had stolen from the lost and found. Each suspicion added dollars, and each dollar made their confusion sweeter. I hated that I was starting to enjoy it. Kian noticed first. He always noticed anything that threatened the order of the room. In finance lab, he walked by my desk and saw the paid kit open on my tablet. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him and asked which rich idiot I was leeching from. The system paid me $12 at once, more than before. His family rank made his contempt premium. That number changed my strategy. If ordinary students gave me coins, Kian gave me bills. If professors looked down on me, maybe they paid even more. If trustees, donors, and billionaires insulted me, what would happen then? The thought scared me because it turned humiliation into opportunity. It also scared me because I knew how quickly pain could become greed when money stood beside it. I tested it during a group assignment. When Kian's friend Jace tried to assign me the easiest task, I asked to handle the financial model instead. He laughed so hard the whole table turned toward us. My phone buzzed with reward after reward. Then I completed the model in 10 minutes, corrected his formula, and sent it to the group chat before his smile had fully disappeared. For the first time, the class looked at me without laughing. It was not respect yet. It was irritation mixed with suspicion. Kian's jaw tightened as the professor praised the model and asked who prepared it. Jace pointed at me like he was accusing me of a crime. The professor paused, then said even unexpected students could be useful sometimes. The system rewarded me again, but the praise felt dirtier than the insult. After class, a quiet girl named Sarah Hahn stopped me near the stairs. She was from the top donor family, but never sat with Kian's group. She looked at my old phone and asked if I had received something strange recently. My stomach dropped. I asked what she meant, but she only said Eden Crown had a way of revealing people. Then she walked away before I could ask anything else. I followed her, but she disappeared into the administrative wing where scholarship students were not allowed. My phone stayed silent, which meant she had not looked down on me. That bothered me more than the insults. Everyone else had already placed me into a category, but Sarah had looked at me like she was waiting for a result, like she knew the exam had started and I was the only one who had not read the question. By the end of the week, my balance had grown past $500. It was not enough to change my life, but it was enough to breathe. I paid rent arrears at home, bought Noor's books, and cleared my mother's pharmacy bill. The system sent a small message after each transfer. Compassionate spending recorded. Multiplier unchanged. It felt almost disappointed, as if kindness was acceptable but not exciting. Then came the freshman mixer, an event designed for rich students to pretend networking was friendship. I only attended because absence would affect scholarship standing. Kian saw me near the drinks and raised his glass like he had found entertainment. He announced to the circle that Eden Crown's inspiring scholarship story had arrived and asked me to give a speech about surviving on instant noodles. The laughter hit from every side. My phone vibrated so much I had to grip it. The rewards stacked faster than ever because half the room came from powerful families. My balance crossed $1,000, then two. My face burned, but my mind became frighteningly calm. Kian had gathered the exact audience I needed. He thought he was making me smaller. He was multiplying me. I stepped forward and thanked him for giving me the stage. Then I said I did know about instant noodles, because unlike some people, I understood the value of things before wasting them. A few students stopped laughing. Kian's eyes narrowed. I added that if survival embarrassed him, maybe he should try earning one meal without his father's name attached. The room went silent, and my phone flashed a warning. Cruelty impulse detected. Accelerated reward available. Say one more line to activate humiliation reversal bonus. The system wanted me to continue. It wanted me to hurt him publicly, and a part of me wanted it too. I knew exactly what to say about his family's bribed contracts. The rumors everyone whispered but feared to repeat. One sentence could have made me richer and made him bleed. Instead, I stopped. Kian's reputation was not my meal. His cruelty did not have to teach me cruelty. I turned away while the room still waited for the killing blow. My phone buzzed once, slower than before. Restraint recorded. Hidden score increased. No money arrived with that message, but somehow it felt heavier than all the dollars I had earned that night. Kian did not forgive restraint. Men like him needed revenge more when you refused to play their game. On Monday, my scholarship account was frozen for document verification. The finance office claimed my income status looked suspicious because I had recently paid family bills. They asked where the money came from. I could not say a magic system paid me whenever rich people behaved exactly like themselves. For 3 days, I was treated like a criminal in slow motion. My meal card stopped working. My library access paused. The dorm officer told me my bed would be reassigned if the scholarship hold continued. Every clerk who looked at my file with disgust fed the system a little more, but the money no longer felt like victory. Kian had found a way to make my secret look like guilt. Sarah appeared again outside the finance office. She handed me a printed policy showing scholarship students could not be suspended without a review panel. I asked why she was helping me, and she said because systems were useless if no one challenged the people controlling them. The word systems made my pulse jump. When I asked if she knew about my phone, she looked at me for a long second and said not enough. With Sarah's policy sheet, I forced a review. Kian attended as student council witness, pretending concern. He said students receiving mysterious funds could damage Eden Crown's reputation. Dean Voss listened with folded hands, already convinced. Then my phone flashed a new mission. Endure formal contempt from institutional authority. Reward multiplier, x100. My mouth went dry as the dean called me a risk to the university's image. Every word from Dean Voss hit like a hammer and paid like a storm. By the time he finished suggesting I voluntarily withdraw, my account had jumped past $30,000. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I felt sick. The system was teaching me that the cruelest people were the most profitable. If I followed that lesson too far, I would start seeking monsters instead of avoiding them. When the dean asked for proof of legitimate income, I did the only thing I could. I presented freelance scholarship consulting receipts Sarah helped me prepare using real tutoring work I had done for students in my neighborhood. It did not explain everything, but it made the suspension illegal. Dean Voss hated being cornered more than he hated me. The hold was lifted, and Kian's smile finally cracked. That night the system upgraded. Dignity balance exceeded threshold. Reward rate increased. $10 per contempt event. Special store unlocked. I opened the new menu and saw options that made my hands tremble. Luxury transport. Premium housing. Corporate shares. Legal defense packages. Reputation attacks. There were also quieter options. Medical grants, debt relief, education funds. The system was not only giving money. It was offering directions. I bought the medical grant first. My mother's hospital consultation was scheduled within an hour. Nor called crying because a private clinic had contacted them with a covered appointment. I told her it was from a scholarship welfare program. The lie tasted better than the truth because it gave them hope without making them afraid. The system recorded compassionate spending again, and this time my multiplier rose slightly. The next day, students noticed I arrived in a hired car instead of walking from the bus stop. It was not even luxury, just clean and reliable, but Eden Crown treated any improvement in my life like theft. Mira asked if I had found a sugar mother. Jace asked if poverty had a premium version. My phone collected their contempt $10 at a time, and I realized survival had become a business model. I started dressing better, not extravagantly, just enough to remove the easiest target. That angered them more. Poor people were supposed to remain visibly poor so everyone else could feel accurate. When I wore a new watch, Kian asked if it came free with a loan scam. When I answered that time looked the same no matter who wore it, the class laughed at him instead of me for the first time. The laugh changed everything. Kian could tolerate my poverty, my intelligence, even my stubbornness, but not the room shifting away from him. He waited until our investment simulation contest, where teams managed virtual portfolios judged by real sponsors. He assigned me to a weak team and told everyone I would finally learn that money was harder to manage than hunger. The system paid, and I smiled before I could stop myself. Our team had two overlooked students, Anika and Tomas, who were used to being ignored for different reasons. Anika had a speech disorder that made presentations hard, and Tomas was a legacy student whose family had gone bankrupt. Kian expected us to collapse. Instead, I used every free hour to build a strategy around undervalued companies, ethical restructuring, and risk hedges. For once, my hunger gave me sharper instincts than their comfort. During the preliminary round, Kian's team went flashy, buying famous stocks and bragging about imaginary profits. We went quiet, steady, and precise. When the market scenario crashed halfway through, their portfolio bled while ours survived. Sponsors started asking who designed our model. Kian said luck could look smart in small amounts. My phone rewarded his insult, but the sponsor beside him frowned. By the final presentation, Anika was terrified. Kian's friends whispered that nobody wanted to hear her stammer through charity economics. The system paid me, but I ignored the money and stood beside her. I told her we built the model together, so we would present together. She nodded, shaking, then delivered the clearest explanation in the room. Every pause became strength because the numbers were undeniable. We won second place. Kian won first because his father's company sponsored the prize, but everyone knew our model was better. A sponsor from Helios Capital slipped me a card and told me to apply for their Youth Innovation Grant. Kian saw it happen and crushed his paper cup in his hand. My phone flashed a message. Influence earned without cruelty. Long-term value increased. That evening, Sarah asked me what I would do if the system made me richer than everyone who hurt me. I asked if she finally admitted she knew about it. She said she knew rumors, old ones, about a program designed by a billionaire who believed humiliation revealed both victim and oppressor. I asked whether it was dangerous. Sarah looked toward the campus lights and said money was never the dangerous part. Before I could ask more, my phone displayed a new challenge. Public ranking event detected. Opportunity: convert contempt into dominance. Suggested action: humiliate Kian Astor during sponsor gala. Estimated reward: $500,000. My breath stopped. $500,000 for one act of cruelty. Enough to move my family forever. Enough to make every problem disappear. All I had to do was become exactly what Kian already believed I was. The sponsor gala arrived 2 weeks later. I was invited because of our investment model, though several students insisted it must be a clerical mistake. I used system money to rent a proper suit, and for the first time, nobody at the door questioned whether I belonged. That almost made me miss the old insults. Respect without dignity still felt like another costume, but at least the guard opened the door. Inside, I saw the world that had always made decisions about people like me without inviting us into the room. Donors laughed over scholarships like they were decorations. CEOs discussed layoffs beside dessert tables. Kian moved through them like a prince. His father, Dorian Astor, stood beside Dean Voss, and the two of them looked at me with the same expression, irritation that a locked door had failed. Dorian approached first. He congratulated me on surviving Eden Crown's adjustment period, then said environments like this could overwhelm students from limited backgrounds. My phone exploded with AX 100 Premium Authority reward. He asked whether I needed help returning to a more suitable lane. I smiled politely while my account climbed. One sentence from that man paid more than a week of student cruelty. The system urged me again. Expose Astor contract fraud publicly. Reward: $500,000 plus reputation reversal. I had discovered hints through our simulation research. Dorian's company had used scholarship funds as tax shields while cutting actual student support. I could reveal it in front of sponsors. I could destroy Kian's perfect stage. I could win. My thumb hovered over the file on my phone. Then I saw Sarah across the hall, watching without interfering. Her expression asked one question. Was I exposing corruption to protect people or to enjoy watching Kian fall? I hated that the answer was not clean. My anger wanted justice dressed as revenge. My family needed money. My pride wanted applause. The system waited, silent and hungry, as if it had reached the real exam. I did not expose the file that night. Instead, I asked Dorian, loudly enough for nearby sponsors to hear, whether Astor Foundation would support transparent scholarship audits next semester. It was not an attack, but it was a trap. If he refused, he looked guilty. If he agreed, his records opened. His smile froze. The system did not give me the $500,000, but it recorded strategic restraint. Kian cornered me outside the gala balcony after that. For the first time, his polished mask cracked completely. He asked who I thought I was, walking into his world and touching his family name. I told him I was someone who had nothing, which meant threats had less weight. He shoved me against the railing. My phone buzzed once. Physical contempt detected. Assault evidence recorded. I could have pressed charges immediately, but Sarah stepped between us before Kian did anything worse. She told him the balcony had security audio. Kian looked from her to me, betrayed by the fact that she had protected someone he considered beneath both of them. He left, but his eyes promised escalation. Sarah exhaled and told me restraint was not weakness, but refusing to become predictable. I asked why she cared so much about my choices. Sarah finally told me her grandfather had built Helios Capital, the company behind many Eden Crown scholarships. Before he died, he created a succession trial after watching heirs, executives, and charity boards become cruel behind polite language. The system had appeared to several candidates over the years. Most became rich quickly. None remained kind. I asked if she was saying I was a candidate to inherit Helios. She said she did not know the full mechanism, only that her grandfather left behind a digital trust that tested people through money, humiliation, and choice. The system was not supposed to choose the strongest. It was supposed to find someone who remembered pain without worshiping it. My hands felt cold around the phone. Suddenly, every insult felt less random. The system had not saved me because I was special. It had placed a mirror in front of me and waited to see what I would do with power. I thought of all the moments I had wanted to hurt people back. I thought of the reward I had almost accepted. Sarah said nothing, because the worst judgment was always the one I made inside myself. The audit question from the gala spread quietly but dangerously. Sponsors began asking Dean Voss for scholarship transparency. Dorian Astor's office issued polite statements. Kian stopped mocking me in public, which meant he was preparing something private. My rewards dropped because fewer people dared insult me openly, and I felt a strange withdrawal. I had become used to being paid for pain, and that realization disgusted me. To replace the rewards, I used the system store to buy small shares in companies connected to campus services. Laundry, cafeteria supply, student housing maintenance. Nothing flashy, but enough to access records. What I found made my stomach twist. Scholarship students were overcharged through hidden fees. Poor applicants were discouraged before interviews. Eden Crown was not simply elitist. It was engineered to keep people like me grateful and trapped. I shared the records with Sarah, Anika, and Tomas. Anika wanted to leak everything. Tomas warned that rich families survived scandal by feeding someone smaller to the wolves. I wanted to move fast, but Sarah said truth needed structure or it became entertainment. She suggested building a student welfare coalition first, so when the scandal broke, the victims had names, demands, and protection. Kian struck before we were ready. An anonymous post accused me of manipulating scholarship sympathy while secretly receiving illegal funds. Screenshots showed my family payments, clinic transfer, rented car receipt, and luxury suit rental. By morning, Eden Crown Student Forum called me a scammer. Students who had insulted me for being poor now insulted me for not being poor enough. The system rewarded every contradiction. The money flooded in at a terrifying rate. $10 from each contempt event became thousands as the post went viral across campus. My phone displayed a live count of people looking down on me through comments, shares, and laughing reactions. My balance crossed $100,000 before lunch. I sat in the bathroom stall, shaking, while strangers turned my life into profit. The system offered a response package. Destroy anonymous poster. Reveal Kian Astor as source. Reward. $1 million. My thumb hovered again. He deserved it. He had invaded my family's privacy and weaponized my mother's hospital bill. If I ruined him, no one would call it unfair. But the package included personal attacks, edited rumors, and pressure tactics. It was not justice. It was revenge with better software. I chose a legal defense package instead. It cost more than I wanted, but within hours, a real attorney sent Eden Crown a notice demanding removal of private financial data and preservation of server logs. Then I posted a short statement. I said my family had been poor, not available for public judgment. I said receiving help was not fraud. I said any investigation should include hidden fees charged to scholarship students. The response was chaos. Some students mocked me harder, which paid me more. Others went quiet. A few scholarship students messaged me privately with their own stories. One girl had lost housing over a fee nobody explained. Another had been forced to work unpaid for a donor event. Each message made the scandal bigger than me, and for the first time, I did not feel alone inside it. Kian realized his mistake too late. By trying to isolate me, he had gathered every hidden victim into one place. Sarah helped us create an encrypted folder of documents. Tomas contacted alumni whose families had been pushed out. Anika prepared statements from students who had never dared speak. My system balance kept growing, but my attention shifted from what contempt paid to what truth could repair. Dean Voss summoned me and offered a settlement. He called it a misunderstanding and said the university could provide enhanced support if I withdrew my allegations. The offer included enough money to solve my family problems without the system. He expected poverty to have a price because in his world, everything did. My phone vibrated as he looked at me like a desperate boy pretending to be brave. The system presented two options. Accept settlement, immediate wealth, investigation closed. Reject settlement, uncertain risk, hidden score opportunity. I thought about mother, Noor, rent, medicine, and every night we had counted coins. Then I thought about the students who had messaged me after years of silence. If I accepted, I would not be escaping a cage. I would be helping repaint it for the next person. I rejected the settlement. Dean Voss's expression hardened. He said I was making powerful enemies for people who would abandon me when consequences arrived. Maybe he was right. Fear moved through me like cold water. But when I walked out, Anika, Tomas, and Sarah were waiting in the hall. Behind them stood 7 scholarship students I barely knew. Nobody cheered. They simply stood there, and that was enough. The system upgraded again. Collective dignity event recorded. Reward rate increased. $100 per contempt event. Institutional challenge unlocked. Available purchase, independent audit firm. Available purchase, emergency student relief fund. Available purchase, hostile media attack. The last option glowed brighter than the rest, almost tempting. I understood then that the system never stopped offering cruelty. It only changed the packaging as my power grew. I purchased the audit firm and relief fund. The system processed both without celebration. Within 2 days, students facing hidden fees received emergency support anonymously. Within 4 days, auditors began requesting documents from service contractors. Dorian Astor's company appeared in too many places. Cafeteria supply, housing repairs, scholarship fundraising, campus security. His family was not donating to Eden Crown. They were feeding from it. Kian stopped coming to class. Rumors said his father had locked him out of company meetings. I expected to feel satisfied, but I only felt the shape of something larger moving closer. Kian had been cruel because he could afford to be. Dorian was cruel because cruelty made him money. Dean Voss protected him because institutions love donors more than students. I was not fighting a bully anymore. I was fighting a machine. One evening, Kian found me outside the library. He looked exhausted, no friends behind him, no performance left. He said I had no idea what I was doing. If his father fell, half the scholarships would vanish, companies would pull donations, and students I claimed to protect would suffer first. I asked if that was a warning or a confession. He said it was reality, and poor people should understand reality better than anyone. My phone rewarded his contempt, but not as much as before. Maybe because there was fear mixed in. Kian said his father used everyone, including him. He had leaked my records because Dorian told him I was a threat to the family. For the first time, his voice did not sound proud. It sounded trapped. I wanted to dismiss it as an act, but pain recognizes pain even when it wears expensive shoes. I told him confession without action was just self-pity. If he wanted me to believe him, he had to provide proof. Kian laughed bitterly and said betraying his father would destroy him. I said staying loyal would destroy more people. He looked at me like he hated that I was right. Then he walked away without agreeing. But the next morning, an encrypted file appeared in my inbox. The file contained meeting notes, payment routes, and messages between Dorian and Dean Voss. It proved the scholarship system had been used to generate public praise while redirecting funds into companies Dorian controlled. It also showed Kian had participated in smaller cover-ups. He had not been innocent. He had simply been less powerful than the monster teaching him. The truth was useful, but it was not clean. Sarah read the file in silence. Her hands shook when she saw her grandfather's foundation name attached to the fraud. She had believed Helios scholarships were still helping students. Instead, Dorian had wrapped theft in her family legacy. She apologized like the crime belonged to her blood. I told her guilt was only useful if it moved. She nodded and said then we would move. We prepared for the University Founders Assembly, where donors, executives, and trustees gathered to celebrate Eden Crown's legacy. Dean Voss planned to announce a new Asterhan scholarship wing, using Sarah's family name to cover Dorian's corruption. It was the perfect stage. The system knew it too. Public institutional exposure available. Reward depends on method. Cruel spectacle. High cash. Ethical disclosure. Hidden score. I hated how easy the cruel option looked. It would let me play edited clips, mock Kian, shame Dean Voss, and turn the room into a battlefield. The money estimate climbed past $10 million. The ethical option offered no visible amount. Only a line that said consequence will be slower, but ownership will be stable. For a boy who had once counted bus fare, slow justice felt almost insulting. The night before the assembly, Mother called after her clinic appointment. She said the doctor finally had a treatment plan and Noor had topped her class. Then she asked softly if I was safe. I lied too slowly. She told me money was useful, but if I lost myself chasing respect from people without hearts, poverty would not be the worst thing that happened to us. I could not answer for a while. At the assembly, I sat among students while donors smiled at banners about opportunity. Sarah stood near the stage, forced to represent the Han family. Kian sat beside his father, looking like a prisoner in a tailored cage. Dean Voss praised generosity, excellence, and tradition. Each word sounded like a locked door. My phone buzzed as trustees glanced at me with contempt for daring to attend. When Dorian began his speech, the system opened both exposure paths again. Cruel spectacle glowed like fire. Ethical disclosure weighted like a stone. I looked at Kian, then at Anika, Tomas, and the scholarship students holding printed packets under their seats. This was not my revenge anymore. If I turned it into revenge, I would steal the story from everyone who had suffered. I chose ethical disclosure. The auditorium screens shifted to a clean document timeline. Not rumors, not insults, just contracts, dates, signatures, and money routes. Sarah stepped forward and announced that the Han family requested an immediate independent investigation into misuse of scholarship funds. Anika followed with student testimonies. Tomas named the hidden fees. I presented the audit request and legal evidence. Nobody screamed. That made it worse for them. Dorian tried to laugh it off until Kian stood. The room changed before he spoke. He admitted he had helped bury complaints and leak my records under pressure from his father. He did not ask forgiveness. He placed copies of internal messages on the table and said the Astor Foundation had stolen from students it claimed to save. Dorian's face emptied of blood. The system rewarded me, but not with the 10 million from cruelty. Instead, it displayed truth without spectacle recorded. Collective score increased. Trustees demanded a closed session, but students had already uploaded the documents to legal counsel and major alumni groups. Dean Voss tried to order security to remove us. Security hesitated because their own contractor was in the evidence. Power looked invincible until the first person refused to move. By sunset, Eden Crown froze Astor-linked contracts. By midnight, Dean Voss was placed on leave. Dorian's company issued denial after denial, each colder than the last. Kian disappeared from campus. The student forum that had mocked me began rewriting history, acting as if everyone had supported the truth from the beginning. My system collected contempt from those who still called me a troublemaker, but the money no longer thrilled me. For 2 weeks, the scandal consumed Eden Crown. Reporters waited outside the gate. Scholarship students became interview subjects, which made me worry they were being turned into symbols instead of people. Sarah used her family lawyers to protect their identities. Anika became braver with every statement. Tomas started sleeping again. I kept receiving system rewards, but I also kept asking why the final inheritance had not unlocked. Then the backlash came. Donors threatened to withdraw. Rich parents accused us of damaging the university's reputation. Some students said hidden fees were bad, but exposing them publicly was selfish. The system paid me hundreds of dollars per comment. I watched my balance rise while people blamed victims for making powerful thieves uncomfortable. That was the day I understood contempt was not always loud. Sometimes it were concern. A message arrived from an unknown Helios address inviting me to the old Han Tower downtown. Sarah received the same invitation, but hers included a warning not to interfere with the candidate's final evaluation. She insisted on coming anyway. The tower had been mostly empty since her grandfather died. At the top floor, a conference room screen turned on by itself, and an old recorded voice greeted me by name. The voice belonged to Chairman Enoch Han, Sarah's grandfather. He said if I was hearing the message, I had survived contempt without letting it become my only language. The system had tested not poverty, but reaction to power. Every candidate received money through humiliation because pain was the fastest way to reveal hunger. Then he apologized, because even a test built for justice could still hurt the innocent. He explained that Helios had once funded scholarships worldwide, but executives and partner families twisted charity into influence. Before dying, he built the dignity system to find someone outside the elite circle who could inherit controlling authority over the foundation trust. But there was one final condition. The chosen candidate had to decide what to do with all personal wealth accumulated during the trial. My phone displayed the final choice. Keep personal fortune and gain partial Helios access. Donate trial earnings to affected students and gain full foundation authority. Refuse both and erase system memory. I stared at the numbers. My personal balance had grown beyond anything my family could imagine. Keeping it would not be evil. We had suffered. We deserved safety. Yet the system had paid me from contempt created by a broken world. Sarah did not tell me what to choose. That made it harder. If she had pushed me toward sacrifice, I could resent her. If she had pushed me toward wealth, I could hide behind permission. Instead, she said her grandfather always feared that even good people became skilled at justifying comfort once they had enough of it. I thought of my mother's medicine, Noor's future, and every student still waiting for refunds. I chose to donate the trial earnings to a protected student restitution fund, but I added one condition. My family's medical care and basic living costs would be covered through the same transparent aid rules as any affected family, not secret privilege. The system paused for so long I thought I had broken it. Then the screen turned white. Final alignment confirmed. Full authority transferred. I expected fireworks, maybe a balance explosion, but the system simply changed. The reward counter vanished. The insult notification stopped. In their place appeared Helios Foundation governance access, legal trusteeship documents, and an emergency reform dashboard. The thing that had once paid me for being looked down on now gave me responsibility for making that contempt less profitable for everyone else. Sarah cried quietly when the transfer completed. She said her grandfather had chosen a stranger over his own family. I told her maybe he chose the person his family should stand beside. She laughed through tears and said that sounded annoyingly noble. For the first time since arriving at Eden Crown, I felt no need to prove I belonged in the room. The room had to prove it deserved us. The legal transfer made me a target overnight. Dorian Astor sued the foundation, claiming the system was manipulated. Dean Voss accused me of cyber fraud. Anonymous accounts called me a thief who used poverty as theater. For the first time, those insults paid me nothing. The silence from my phone felt strange, like losing armor. I had to stand without turning their contempt into money. That was harder than I expected. When people mocked me now, it hurt plainly again. No reward softened the sting. No balance increase turned humiliation into strategy. I realized the system had protected me from pain by giving it a price, but it had also tempted me to need the pain. Without it, I had to build dignity the old way, through people, choices, and consequences. The first morning without rewards, I walked through campus and felt every glance like it had weighed again. Some students moved aside respectfully, but others stared with open resentment. One boy whispered that I had scammed my way from scholarship rat to foundation prince. My hand moved toward my phone out of habit, waiting for the buzz that would turn pain into numbers. Nothing happened. I had to keep walking with the insult unpaid. That emptiness humbled me faster than poverty had. I had mistaken the system's payments for courage, but courage without compensation felt much quieter. It was choosing not to answer every sneer because there were 10 meetings ahead. It was letting rumors pass without buying a reputation repair package. It was realizing I could now afford almost anything except the old comfort of being rewarded for enduring. The first attack came before breakfast. A donor family released a statement accusing me of hijacking Helios through emotional manipulation. They called me unstable, unqualified, and dangerously resentful of success. Old me would have watched the balance climb and laughed. New me read the statement 3 times, felt my stomach twist, and asked Sarah whether ignoring it looked weak. She said strength was not reacting at the speed your enemies preferred. By noon, 3 trustees requested emergency limits on my authority. Their language sounded responsible, but every clause moved power back into the hands that had ignored the theft for years. They wanted me symbolic, grateful, and controllable. I understood the trap because I had lived under its smaller versions. First they praise your inspiring struggle, then they tell you inspiration should not touch budgets. Sarah warned me that boardrooms were battlefields where nobody raised their voice. She taught me to read pauses, footnotes, and friendly amendments. I hated how much of power hid inside procedures. In my old life, cruelty arrived as laughter, coins, and slammed doors. Here it arrived as agenda revisions sent at midnight and legal phrases designed to exhaust anyone without an army of lawyers. I built my army from people who had no reason to trust institutions. Anika brought student testimonies. Tomas brought financial patterns. Sarah brought legal memory. The cafeteria worker brought staff complaints in a folder wrapped with rubber bands. Even Kian, still under investigation, sent a list of Asterlink contacts who would pretend neutrality while protecting Dorian. None of us looked impressive separately, but together we became hard to erase. Then a student named Horace accused the relief fund of favoritism. He claimed his application was denied because he had criticized me online. The story spread fast because it was exactly the kind of hypocrisy people wanted from me. A poor boy gets power and becomes another gatekeeper. I wanted to dismiss him as a liar, but Anika stopped me. She said if the office was real, even hostile complaints deserved review. The review hurt because part of Horace's accusation was true. His application had been delayed after a volunteer recognized his account from cruel posts about scholarship students. Nobody denied him officially, but resentment had slowed the process. That was not corruption like Dorian's, but it was still unfair. I called Horace into the office, approved his emergency aid, and apologized for the delay. He looked more confused than grateful. That apology cost me pride, but bought something better. The staff realized the new rules applied, even when the applicant was unpleasant. Horace did not become my supporter overnight. He still disliked me, maybe more because he owed help to someone he had mocked. But the story changed shape. We were not building a system that rewarded good victims. We were building one that protected rights before judging personalities. The second attack was uglier. Reporters showed up outside my mother's clinic and asked if she felt guilty benefiting from a scandal. Nur called me crying from school because classmates had seen clips online. For a few minutes, my vision went red. I could buy investigators, sue everyone, destroy careers, and make examples so brutal no one touched my family again. The old system was gone, but its lessons still whispered. Mother told me not to come shouting. She had already walked past the reporters without answering. She said people who tried to shame the sick had already revealed themselves. I asked how she could sound so calm. She said she was not calm. She was choosing what deserved her remaining strength. That sentence did more to restrain me than any warning Sarah had given. We created privacy protections for all students and families connected to aid cases. No reporter, donor, or administrator could access personal hardship records without legal review. It should have existed already, but suffering had been treated like promotional material for too long. I signed the policy with shaking hands, because this one came from a wound still open. Sometimes good rules are just pain refusing to repeat itself. A public relations firm offered to clean my image by turning me into a heroic brand. They wanted scripted interviews, polished photos, and a softer story where everyone cried at the right moment. They said donors loved resilience when it came with clean lighting. I asked whether they could make hidden fees less illegal. The consultant laughed, then realized I was not joking. We ended the meeting early. Sarah later said I could not reject every tool because bad people use similar ones. She was right, but I feared becoming packaged. The rich had a talent for turning rebellion into merchandise. I agreed to basic communications help, but only if students approved their own stories and no family hardship was used without consent. It was slower, messier, and less marketable. That was why it felt honest. Kian's first useful act after the transfer was identifying the anonymous accounts spreading the worst lies. They were connected to a reputation agency Dorian had used before. Kian gave us invoices, burner contacts, and campaign schedules. He did it without drama, but his hands trembled when he handed over the files. Betraying a father once was brave. Betraying the fear of him every day was harder. I asked why he had not destroyed those files earlier. Kian said because keeping evidence made him feel protected, and using it made him feel doomed. I understood that too well. Poor people keep documents because systems deny them. Rich prisoners keep documents because families own them. Different cages, same instinct. I told him the evidence would be used carefully, not as a weapon against him unless he lied again. The reputation agency tried to bait me by posting a fake luxury receipt in my name. It showed a private jet booking, imported watches, and a dinner bill larger than my old yearly rent. Students who already hated me believed it instantly. The truth was easy to prove, but the speed of the lie frightened me. Wealth did not only buy comfort. It bought reality for the first few hours. I wanted to respond with screenshots of every corrupt donor's spending habits. Sarah said that would turn the fight into a mud festival where the dirtiest hands felt most at home. Instead, we released a simple ledger of my approved salary, family support rules, and all foundation-controlled expenses. Boring truth moved slower than scandal, but it left fewer hooks for enemies to grab. A hostile town hall followed. Parents demanded to know why scholarship reform mattered more than campus reputation. One man said students like me should be grateful, not disruptive. My throat tightened because the sentence was old, just wearing a parent badge now. I answered that gratitude was not silence, and a university that required silence from the helped was not generous. It was renting obedience. Not everyone applauded. Some booed. Some walked out. But a mother from the back stood and said her son had hidden unpaid fees because he felt ashamed. Then another parent stood. Then a staff member. The room did not become friendly, but it became complicated. That was enough. Cruel narratives survive by keeping victims separate. Once stories stand beside each other, contempt has to work harder. Horace later admitted someone had encouraged him to exaggerate his complaint. He refused to name them at first, afraid his aid would be revoked. I told him aid was not payment for loyalty. That was the rule. He stared at me like he was trying to decide whether a rule could be trusted. Finally, he named a trustee's assistant tied to Dorian's donor circle. The trail led to Trustee Mallory Vale, a woman who smiled at me in meetings while voting against every reform. She had not stolen like Dorian, but she had protected the culture that made theft easy. When confronted, she called her actions stability management. I had heard enough polished phrases to recognize cowardice wearing perfume. The board recommended a quiet reprimand. I demanded a public ethics review. That demand almost cost me. Several trustees said I was creating enemies faster than reforms. Tomas privately agreed that I needed to choose battles. Anika disagreed and said quiet reprimands were how rot survived. I listened to both and changed the request. The review would focus not on humiliating Mallory, but on creating rules against trustee interference in aid decisions. Consequence with structure, not spectacle. I was learning. The ethics review exposed 3 more interference attempts. None looked dramatic alone. A delayed application here, a discouraged complaint there, a donor preference hidden inside eligibility language. But together they formed a pattern of soft control. People like to imagine corruption as envelopes of cash in dark rooms. At Eden Crown, corruption often looked like someone powerful saying, "Maybe not that student." While we fought inside the board, my relatives discovered headlines about Helios. Cousins who had ignored us for years suddenly called mother with praise sharp enough to cut. An uncle asked if I could invest in his business. Another hinted that family should come before strangers. I wanted to help everyone just to prove I had not become selfish. Mother warned me that guilt could bankrupt the soul faster than greed. We made family boundaries together. I would support emergencies transparently, not fund pride, gambling, or lazy entitlement. Some relatives called me arrogant. Some said money had changed me. Maybe it had, but not in the way they meant. Poverty had taught me to give even when empty. Power had to teach me when giving became another form of being used. Noor faced her own version of the story at school. Some classmates treated her like a celebrity. Others called her charity princess. She punched one boy in the shoulder and then cried because she thought she had ruined my reforms. I told her reforms could survive one angry sister. Then we talked about strength, shame, and not letting other people decide which version of you appears. Her school asked if I wanted the boy punished severely. For a moment, I did. Instead, we arranged a mediated apology and a session about financial bullying. Noor hated that answer at first. Later, she admitted the boy apologized like he actually understood why the words hurt. I did not know if he changed forever, but he changed that day, and sometimes policy begins with one less wound. Sarah watched me handle family, students, staff, trustees, and reporters until one night she said I was trying to become a system by myself. I laughed, then realized she was serious. She said the old app had nearly broken me by making every insult pass through my hands. If every reform also passed through my hands, I would simply replace one dangerous design with another. So we decentralized the work. Student panels reviewed aid disputes. Staff representatives joined contractor meetings. Outside auditors received automatic access. My approval became one checkpoint, not the whole road. Letting go felt like losing control, but control had never been the same as safety. The people who hurt us had controlled everything. We needed trust with teeth. The first student vote under the new structure rejected my proposal for a fast emergency loan program. I thought it was practical. They thought it could pressure poor students into debt, even with low interest. My pride flared because I had designed it carefully. Then I remembered how many elites had justified bad ideas by being offended at criticism. I withdrew the proposal and asked them to rewrite it. Their version was better. Grants came first, loans only after counseling, and repayment could be paused during family crisis. It served fewer headlines, but more humans. When I signed it, Anika smirked and said democracy looked good on me when I stopped wincing. I told her leadership looked easy on her because she enjoyed making me suffer. She said accountability was her love language. Sarah faced pressure from her own family. An aunt accused her of letting an outsider steal the Han legacy. Sarah replied that a legacy stolen by transparency was never worth protecting. The argument ended with her losing access to several private family accounts. She pretended not to care, but I saw her staring at the notification later. Choosing justice did not make inheritance stop hurting. I offered to intervene, and she refused immediately. She said she would not fight nepotism by borrowing my authority like a sword. If she stayed on the board, it had to be because her work deserved it. That humbled me. I had been so busy fearing corruption that I sometimes tried to rescue people before asking whether rescue would shrink them. Sarah did not need saving. She needed allies who respected her agency. A week later, she gave the strongest board presentation I had ever seen. No emotional pleading, no family name. Just evidence that transparent scholarship funds attracted better long-term donors than vanity projects. Even hostile trustees listened because numbers had a way of entering rooms where morality was stopped at the door. Afterward, her aunt sent no apology, but 3 donors requested meetings under Sarah's new model. While campus politics shifted, South Ward watched me with mixed eyes. Some neighbors were proud. Others said I now belonged to the rich side of the city. My childhood friend Bilal confronted me outside our old grocery shop and asked when I had become too busy to visit without security. I wanted to explain lawsuits, threats, and schedules. Instead, I heard the hurt under his anger. I spent the evening walking through streets that had raised me. The broken drains were still there. The tutoring center still needed fans. The boys outside the tea stall still joked too loudly because unemployment made silence dangerous. I had been fixing Eden Crown because that was where the system put me, but dignity did not end at the university gate. Bilal was right to remind me. We created community advisory seats connected to Helios education funds. Not charity tours. Not rich students visiting poor neighborhoods for photos. Actual budget authority for local teachers, parents, and students. Some board members called it mission drift. I called it remembering where mission came from. The first approved project repaired a study center roof in South Ward. Nurse said that was cooler than any Lamborghini. Dorian's legal team tried to use my community expansion as proof I was mismanaging Helios for personal loyalty. They painted South Ward as my vote bank, as if poor neighborhoods were political props instead of places where children studied under leaking ceilings. For the first time in months, I wanted to shout during a legal meeting. Our attorney touched the table once, and I breathed until anger became usable. We responded with data, graduation rates, scholarship access, tutoring demand, facility needs, independent evaluations. It was exhausting to prove poor children deserve dry classrooms, but proof one where outrage would be dismissed. The court refused Dorian's emergency injunction. That night, Bilal messaged me 2 words, roof fixed. I stared at them longer than any headline. Then the tabloids found Sarah and me. Photos from late meetings became romance rumors. Commentators suggested she was controlling me, or I was using her, depending on which version sold better. Sarah looked furious, but not embarrassed. I asked if she wanted a public denial. She said denying like friendship was shameful would reward the rumor. Instead, we released nothing and went back to work. Privately, I apologized because my life kept dragging her into storms. She said storms were already there. I only made them visible. Then she admitted she was tired of being either heiress, traitor, or love interest in everyone else's explanation. I understood that feeling. People preferred simple roles. Poor hero, rich villain, noble girl, fallen prince. Real humans were harder to monetize. The no-confidence motion came at the end of the quarter. Mallory and 2 trustees argued that reforms were moving too fast, lawsuits were too costly, and my leadership invited instability. They scheduled the vote during exams, hoping students would be too busy to respond. They underestimated students who had spent years studying while surviving crisis. By morning, testimonies flooded every trustee inbox. At the meeting, I expected to defend myself. Instead, Anika spoke about the 8 appeals we had fixed. Tomas showed contractor savings from transparent bidding. Staff representatives described wage recoveries. Parents submitted letters. Even Horace wrote that he still disliked my speeches but trusted the office because it helped him when he was hostile. That one almost made me laugh in the middle of the vote. Kian appeared as a witness by video, still legally restricted from some campus events. He said removing me would not restore stability, only restore silence. He also admitted he once benefited from that silence more than anyone. Coming from him, the words carried a strange force. Not because he was forgiven by everyone, but because he understood the old machine from inside its mouth. The no-confidence motion failed. Mallory resigned from the emergency committee but kept her seat for the moment. I did not celebrate publicly. Sarah said restrained again, and I told her she was becoming predictable. She replied that I needed predictable people around me because my life attracted chaos. She was not wrong. Still, that night our team ate cheap noodles in the office, and somehow they tasted like victory. After surviving the vote, I proposed the Dignity Charter. It would make reforms permanent beyond my authority. Transparent funds, protected complaints, student and staff representation, donor accountability, privacy rights, and automatic audits. Trustees disliked anything that survived leadership changes. That was exactly why it mattered. If reform depended on me staying powerful forever, then it was just another monarchy with better slogans. We found one final note from Enoch Hahn attached to the trust documents. It said any successor who failed to reduce their own indispensability had failed the deepest test. I read that line 3 times. The billionaire who created the system had known the trap waiting after victory. People would call me special until I believed them. Then the foundation would become another monument to one man's ego. The Dignity Charter passed after 9 brutal hours of amendments. It was not perfect. Nothing built by committees ever is. But it locked enough doors behind the thieves and opened enough doors for the unheard. When the vote ended, nobody threw confetti. We were too tired. Anika put her head on the table. Tomas whispered that spreadsheets had saved democracy. Sarah smiled at me like a sunrise after a trial. Only after the charter passed did I feel ready to face Eden Crown as a student again, not a symbol. I still had assignments, exams, and professors who now graded me with suspicious caution. Some feared being too harsh. Others wanted to prove they were not afraid. I asked for anonymous grading wherever possible. Dignity also meant refusing special treatment disguised as guilt. By the time I entered the first formal board meeting under the new charter, I was no longer trying to prove I deserved the chair. I was trying to make the chair less dangerous for whoever came after me. That was the difference the system had nearly failed to teach me. Wealth could open a door. Only shared power could stop that door from becoming another wall. There were nights I still opened the inactive system screen, half hoping for instruction. Not money, just certainty. A clear mission, a reward, a warning, anything easier than deciding with imperfect information. The blank screen reminded me that maturity was not being free from tests. It was facing tests without a glowing answer key. I began writing decisions down before acting on them. Who benefited, who carried risk, who had been consulted, and whether revenge was hiding inside justice. It felt ridiculous at first, like making a budget for my conscience. Then it saved me more than once. Anger becomes less convincing when forced to explain itself on paper. The foundation board tried to control me immediately. They spoke in careful language about transition periods and public optics. One trustee suggested delaying student restitution until donor confidence returned. I asked how long hungry students should wait for rich adults to feel comfortable. Another trustee warned me not to be emotional. I removed him from the emergency committee before the meeting ended. That decision made headlines. Some praised me as bold, others called me unstable. Sarah warned me that reform would fail if I confused speed with strength. She was right. I could not simply throw money at every wound and call it healing. We needed policies, oversight, legal protection, and student voices with actual authority. For the first time, I understood why kindness without structure could be swallowed by smarter cruelty. We created the Student Dignity Office inside Eden Crown, funded independently from donor influence. Hidden fees were suspended. Emergency housing opened. Scholarship rules were rewritten in language normal families could understand. Anika became the first student advocate. Tomas joined the financial review team. I expected them to thank me, but instead they argued with me constantly, which was better. Real allies did not bow. Kian returned 3 weeks later for the disciplinary hearing. He looked thinner, but less polished, like the mirror had finally become honest. Many students wanted him expelled permanently. Some wanted criminal charges. He had leaked my records, covered complaints, and protected his father's schemes. I had every reason to let him be crushed. The old system would have rewarded that moment beautifully. At the hearing, Kian admitted everything again. He did not ask to stay. He said Eden Crown had taught him that power meant never being the one punished, and he had believed it because believing was easier than resisting. He looked at me only once and said leaking my mother's medical payments was the lowest thing he had ever done. I believed him. That did not erase what he had done. The panel asked for my statement. I said forgiveness was not the same as removing consequences. Kian should lose his counsel position, repay damages through community work, testify against Dorian, and complete the year under probation if the affected students agreed. Some students thought I was too soft. Others thought I was cruel for making him face everyone instead of disappearing. Maybe real justice always disappointed people who wanted simple endings. Kian accepted the terms. Dorian disowned him publicly 2 days later, calling him unstable and manipulated. Watching that statement, I understood where Kian's cruelty had been trained. It did not excuse him, but it explained the shape of his cage. Sarah arranged legal protection for him as a witness, not as a friend. I respected that difference. Mercy without boundaries was just another way to create victims. Mother and Noor visited Eden Crown after the reforms began. Noor stared at the campus like it was a fantasy kingdom, then whispered that the fountains looked smaller than she imagined. Mother touched my face and said I looked older. I wanted to tell her everything proudly, but all I could say was that I had made many mistakes and some better choices. She said that was called becoming human. I showed them the new scholarship office, where families could ask questions without being shamed. Mother watched a clerk explain aid forms patiently to a nervous father. Her eyes filled with tears. She said this was better than any mansion I could have bought her. I laughed because I had definitely considered a mansion. She squeezed my hand and said considering was allowed. Worshipping was the danger. The investigation into Dorian expanded beyond Eden Crown. Once one contract cracked, others followed. Former employees came forward. Partner schools requested audits. Helios shares tied to Aster companies collapsed. Dorian tried to flee responsibility through lawyers, but Kian's testimony and the documents trapped him. The man who had spoken to me like I belonged in a smaller lane learned that lanes can become walls. Dean Voss resigned before he could be removed. His farewell letter blamed modern outrage and misunderstood intentions. Anika read it aloud in the student office with dramatic sadness, then filed it under evidence of people who apologize without apologizing. We laughed harder than we should have. It felt good to laugh without needing someone else to bleed. That was a new kind of wealth. Sarah struggled more quietly. Her family name was tied to both the solution and the scandal. Some praised her as a reformer, while others accused her of sacrificing old allies to protect Helios. She confessed one night that she feared becoming another rich person who used poor people's pain to polish her conscience. I told her fear was useful if it kept her listening. She said I sounded like a system notification. We grew closer through work, not grand romance. She challenged my anger when it became too sharp. I challenged her caution when it became fear. There were moments when our hands brushed over documents, and both of us pretended not to notice. But the story was bigger than that, and maybe that was why it felt real. She had met me inside a test, but she stayed after the reward disappeared. 1 month after the assembly, Eden Crown held an open forum for affected students. No donors on stage. No polished speeches. Just students, families, auditors, and trustees forced to listen. A father spoke about selling his tools to pay a hidden housing fee. A girl described skipping meals to afford a required seminar. Every story landed heavier than any insult I had ever monetized. When it was my turn, I did not tell them I had been chosen by a billionaire system. I said I came here wanting only to survive, then became tempted by the power to make others feel small. I said the real victory was not becoming richer than the people who mocked me. It was building a place where their mockery could no longer decide who got to learn. After the forum, an old cafeteria worker approached me. She had once watched Kian's friends toss a coin on my table. I remembered her because she had looked away, embarrassed but silent. She apologized for not speaking up. The old me might have judged her. Instead, I thanked her and asked if staff had hidden fee complaints too. Her eyes widened, and by the next week, our reform expanded beyond students. That was how the work kept growing. Every solved problem opened 3 buried ones. Cleaning contracts underpaid workers. Security policies targeted scholarship students. Alumni donations were restricted by vanity, naming rights instead of need. The foundation had money, but money alone was a loud tool with no conscience. We had to teach it where to go, then prove it went there. I sometimes missed the simplicity of the early system. Someone insulted me, I got paid, and the world made a little more sense. Now people praised me while hiding agendas. They smiled while asking for favors. They called me inspiring when they wanted access. Contempt had been easier to read than respect. That became my next lesson. Dignity was not only surviving disrespect, but also staying awake inside admiration. A media company offered me a documentary deal. The payment could have made me personally rich again. They wanted the story framed as a poor boy humiliating billionaires, with dramatic reenactments and crying family scenes. They especially wanted Mother. I refused. The producer looked at me like I was stupid for rejecting fame. For a second, I almost heard the old reward sound in my imagination. Instead of the documentary, we created a public transparency portal. Every scholarship donation, expense, fee, and contractor payment went online. Trustees hated it. Donors complained that generosity should not be treated like suspicion. I replied that honest generosity survived sunlight. The portal became more popular than expected, and other universities began copying it. For once, imitation felt like justice spreading. Kian's testimony sent Dorian to trial. On the first day, reporters shouted questions at him outside the courthouse. He looked smaller without boardrooms protecting him. When he saw me, he smiled like he still knew something I did not. He said boys like me always became the men they hated once they tasted power long enough. The words found a soft place in me because I feared the same thing. I did not answer him publicly. Later, I wrote the sentence down and kept it inside my desk. Not because I believed him, but because warnings can be useful even from villains. Every month, I reviewed my decisions with a committee that included students, staff, and outside auditors. If I ever became too comfortable being obeyed, I wanted someone close enough to interrupt me. Noor loved telling her classmates that her brother worked at a university and bossed around old rich people. Mother hated that version, but secretly smiled. Our apartment changed slowly. Better medicine, better food, a safer neighborhood, not a palace. I kept wondering if I was denying them luxury to protect my ego. Mother ended that spiral by saying comfort chosen honestly was not the same as greed. So we moved into a modest home near Noor's school. I paid through a transparent salary approved by the foundation board, not hidden system money. The first night, Mother slept without coughing through the wall. Noor claimed the brightest corner for studying. I stood in the kitchen and cried quietly because after all the billions moving through my hands, this small piece felt like the richest thing I had ever touched. At Eden Crown, some rich students adapted quickly to the new order. Others transferred, complaining the university had become political. Scholarship students stopped lowering their voices in expensive hallways. Staff reported abuse without fear of losing contracts. It was not perfect, but the air changed. The silence that once followed poor students was no longer submission. It was concentration before speaking. Mira, who had once asked if I had a sugar mother, approached me after class months later. She apologized awkwardly, then admitted she had repeated things because everyone else did. It was not a heroic apology. It did not erase anything, but it was a crack in the old culture. I accepted it without making her perform guilt. Some people changed through punishment. Others changed through embarrassment that finally became honesty. Jace never apologized. He simply stopped insulting people where anyone could record him. That was fine too. Reform did not require every heart to become pure. Sometimes the best first step was making cruelty inconvenient. The system had understood that better than I did. It paid me when people looked down on me because it knew contempt had always been a currency. We were just changing the exchange rate. Sarah found more recordings from her grandfather in the Tower archives. Some were instructions. Some were confessions. In one, he admitted he had spent his youth humiliating competitors before realizing victory had made him lonely. He built Helios late, trying to repair what ambition had damaged. Sarah cried listening to that one. I realized even the creator of the test had been a man trying not to become his worst self. The final recording was addressed to whoever passed. Enoch Hahn said unlimited money was impossible, not because funds ran out, but because desire expanded to consume any amount. The only real limit had to be chosen. He hoped the successor would not end poverty alone or fix human cruelty with one foundation. He only hoped they would make it harder for dignity to be treated as a luxury. I played that recording for our committee, then proposed a rule. No single person, including me, could control emergency funds without review after the first year. Authority had to become less dramatic and more durable. Some trustees were shocked that I would reduce my own power. Anika said finally, because she was tired of pretending one decent man was a governance model. She was right, as usual. As reform stabilized, my life became less like a revenge story and more like work. Meetings, audits, policy drafts, student complaints, legal reviews. It did not look exciting from the outside. But every time a student stayed enrolled because a hidden fee vanished, every time a parent understood a form, every time a worker received stolen wages, the payoff felt deeper than watching a bully kneel. Kian completed his service hours quietly. He worked with the restitution office, mostly filing documents and answering calls from angry families. At first, people hated hearing his voice. He accepted that. One evening, he told me he used to think shame was something to escape by climbing higher. Now he thought shame was something you carried properly, so it did not fall onto others. I told him that sounded almost wise. We were not friends. Maybe we never would be. But when Dorian was convicted of financial fraud and witness intimidation, Kian did not celebrate. He sat in the back of the courtroom, expression blank, while the father who built him like a weapon was led away. Afterward, he thanked me for not destroying him when I could have. I said the people he hurt had shown more mercy than either of us deserved. He asked if I ever wanted revenge now that the system was gone. I answered honestly, yes, sometimes. When I remembered my mother's records online, or the coin on my lunch table, or Dean Voss suggesting I withdraw, I wanted the old glowing option back. But wanting something did not mean obeying it. That was the difference between pain and character. Sarah and I walked through campus after the trial. The fountain Noor had mocked reflected the evening lights, and students moved around it without noticing us. Sarah asked if I regretted giving up the personal fortune. I thought about the mansion I never bought, the cars I never drove, the easy life I could have claimed. Then I thought about the office full of students who no longer begged for fairness. I told her I regretted nothing, but I still wish the world had not required poor people to prove kindness before receiving help. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said maybe the next system we built should not test the wounded. It should restrain the powerful before they caused wounds. That sentence became the seed of our next project, donor accountability before damage, not after scandal. A year after my first day, Eden Crown invited me to speak at orientation. I almost refused because the irony felt too sharp. Then Anika said new students needed to see someone stand where the polished liars used to stand. So I walked onto the same stage where Kian had once welcomed students like me with fake kindness. The hall was full of nervous faces, proud families, and hidden fears. I did not tell them success was easy. I did not tell them humiliation made them stronger. I hated when powerful people romanticized suffering after surviving it. I told them they deserved respect before achievement, support before crisis, and dignity without proving they could endure cruelty. I told them Eden Crown had failed many students, including me, and our job was to make sure tradition could no longer hide behind marble. In the front row, Mother wiped her eyes while Noor recorded everything badly, mostly capturing the ceiling. Sarah stood near the side doors, smiling like she knew exactly how far I had come and how far I still had to go. Kian watched from the back, no longer president, no longer prince, just another student learning how to live without borrowed power. After the speech, a new scholarship student approached me with a bag almost as worn as mine had been. He asked if people here would look down on him. I wanted to promise they would not, but lies were cheap comfort. So I said some might, but fewer than before, and if they did, he should not have to turn their contempt into fuel alone. We had an office for that now. We had people. He nodded like that answer scared him and helped him at the same time. As he walked away, my old phone vibrated for the first time in months. My breath caught. The cracked screen lit up with one final message. No reward credited. No test assigned. Just a sentence. Dignity shared is wealth multiplied. Then the system icon dissolved like it had never existed. I stood there holding the silent phone while the hallway filled with students. Nobody bowed. Nobody begged. Nobody knew a billionaire system had once counted every time they looked down on me. That was fine. The best ending was not the world knowing how much I had suffered. It was someone else walking through the same gates with a little less fear than I had carried. That night, I visited the cafeteria and sat at the same table where the coin had landed. The worker who had apologized brought tea without charging me and said the student meal fund had helped her nephew enroll. I looked at the table, remembering the old shame, the buzzing phone, the hunger to strike back. The memory still hurt, but it no longer owned me. Sarah joined me after her committee meeting, exhausted and triumphant because trustees had approved the second-year reforms. She asked what I was thinking. I told her I was thinking $1 had almost turned me into a billionaire and almost turned me into a monster. She said almost mattered less than the choice after it. Then she stole my tea and claimed foundation executives should support resource sharing. I laughed so hard the cafeteria worker stared. It was not the laugh of someone who had won revenge. It was the laugh of someone who had survived the version of himself that revenge wanted to create. Outside, Eden Crown still looked expensive, proud, and imperfect. But inside it, something had shifted permanently. Not enough to save everyone forever. Enough to prove saving was possible. I still keep that old coin in my desk, the one thrown at me like I was less than human. I could have framed my first million instead, or the legal transfer, or the headline announcing Dorian's conviction. But the coin reminds me where the story truly began. Not with magic, not with money, with a choice to pick up humiliation without letting it become my language. People still look down on others. Systems still protect the powerful. Money still tries to disguise itself as worth. I know that better than most because I once had an account that grew from cruelty. But I also know contempt can be interrupted, redirected, and made costly. A poor student cannot always buy the university that mocks him. But sometimes, if he refuses to become what hurt him, he can rebuild it. So when people ask how I became powerful, I never say the billionaire system chose me. That sounds too clean, Too lucky, too much like destiny. I say I was looked down on, paid attention, made mistakes, and learned that money can punish, rescue, corrupt, or repair depending on the hand holding it. The system gave me dollars. The people beside me taught me what they were worth. And if there is any final reward, it is not hidden in my bank account. It is in mother sleeping peacefully, nor dreaming bigger without apologizing, Anika speaking without fear, Tomas trusting numbers again, Kian carrying shame without spreading it, Sarah building guardrails around power, and every new student who enters Eden Crown knowing poverty is not a stain. That is the fortune I chose, and for once, nobody can take it from me.